Welcome to the 5th annual Global We Student Alumni Roundtable to discuss Invest in Her, Women Creating Impact Through Entrepreneurship. My name is Sajid Ashraf, and I am privileged to be president of Harvard Global We. Kindly note we are recording today, so we can share this event via Global We's social media platform. Harvard Global Women's Empowerment is a shared interest group of the Harvard Alumni Association. We are dedicated to the empowerment of women through education, dialogue, and connection among individuals working for women's rights and freedoms worldwide. We highlight and raise awareness about issues concerning women's empowerment worldwide, including but not limited to education, political rights, freedom from violence, women's health, and economic empowerment. Our board is as global as our interests, with representatives in the US, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. In fact, I'm Canadian, but I'm currently in Dubai. Our programs chair, Arthi, lives in India. Our treasurer and president-elect, Leah, is in the Chicago area. Our secretary, Janina, is now based out of San Francisco. Our marketing chair, Kendall, is in St. Louis. Our Connect chair, Barbara, is also in the Chicago area. And our outreach chairs, Richard and Rebecca, are based in Turkey and Singapore, respectively. Our membership chair, Corinne, is based in Ohio, in Cleveland. And our essay contest chair and founder, Julie, is also based in the Chicago area. And of course, our student group leader, Amanda, is based in Cambridge. Normally, even as a team, we come together and meet up at least once a year, but we haven't been able to do so since we last met up in Feb 2020, before the world literally changed. Interestingly, while the pandemic forced us to stay in, it did enable us to focus on connecting more. In fact, Global We has done more programming in the last 2 years than ever before, which has really helped us to reflect and learn from each other. Kitty O'Meara sums this up well, and I quote, "And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed." End of quote. We hope that Global We is one of your partners to help with the healing, connecting, and making new choices. We also welcome your engagement as a volunteer with Global We. In fact, we currently have several openings, and if you're interested, please email us to learn more or check the Global We website for details. Also, do remember that we are a 501c3, so any donations will be tax-free, and of course, we welcome your support. Donations can be made by clicking on the Donate tab on our website at harvardglobalwe.org, where you can donate using a credit card or find the information for how to donate by check. Harvard Global We welcomes all participants to this conversation today. To be here is a step forward, as women's empowerment is not about being silent. If each of us can leave here with just one insight about how critical and valued women are within the entrepreneurial ecosystem and how important it is to empower us to persevere as entrepreneurs, we have succeeded. If this event sparks conversations tomorrow with colleagues and classmates, we've succeeded. If just 2 people connect today who will support our mission, we have succeeded. We are a global organization, and having this conversation would be a luxury to many women in other parts of the world. We are grateful for all the wonderful support we've received from fellow SIGs and clubs, as well as the HAA in helping us to get the word out about today. And we are very thankful for our wonderful Global We student group for all their support as well. Our perspective today, and hopefully our discussions, will be framed from the women's empowerment paradigm. We ask that you all be respectful of each other's views. And remember, we are recording today and will post on the Global We website. If anyone has a concern, please do let us know. Our job today as moderators and as your facilitators is to ensure that we have a fruitful discussion that touches the topics you have expressed interest in discussing. This may mean that at times we need to move the conversation along. Please know that each one of you has important stories, views, and questions, and that if we do move the conversation along and have to interrupt or pivot, it is not personal or coming from any intent to disrespect. We will try to follow the outline as best as we can And if we move on, it is to make sure that we have a chance to discuss the main areas with everyone. We ask that we focus on the issues and not digress into politics, as tempting as that could be. As a group, we believe that women's rights are human rights, and we are not owned by one political ideology or party. Normally, we would have this event on campus with coffee and cookies and lots of pictures. So let's take a moment to take a screenshot. If you're comfortable with having your picture taken, please do turn on your camera and we'll take the picture. Leah, can you unspotlight me?
All right, everyone, cameras on. 3, 2, 1, smile. Just for the second shot as well, the second screen. We have lots of enthusiastic attendees today. 3, 2, 1, smile.
Thank you so much, Arthi. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the pictures. Global We's Roundtable is a flagship event, and we are so pleased that it has now moved to a platform that enables greater global participation. As a team, we are very excited to continue our tradition with much gratitude to the entire Global We board for their support, and especially Arthi, who spearheaded today, Kendall and her wonderful marketing team, and Leah and Janina for all their support. Before we begin our discussions, let me also thank you all for joining us and express our deep gratitude to Rebecca, Serena, Tanya, Ebru, Sarah, and Linda for making the time to be here today, and as well to share their experiences. On a personal note, as an entrepreneur, I am really looking forward to this discussion today. It is learning from other women, such as our speakers today, that empowers us to strive forward. Rebecca, Serena, Tanya, Ebru, Sarah, and Linda, thank you for taking the time to join us and sharing your perspectives. And of course, thank you to Arthi and Hannah for moderating. I would now like to introduce Arthi Gupta, who will be the moderator for the first panel of our 5th annual Global We Student Alumni Roundtable. Arthi is a member of the Global We board, our programs chair, and a successful angel investor herself, with a focus on investing in women-centric startups. Please join me in welcoming Arthi. Arthi?
Thank you, Sajida. A very warm welcome, everyone. And thank you once again, Sajida, for the wonderful introduction to Global We in today's event. Our topic for today is Invest in Her, Women Creating Impact Through Entrepreneurship. I will very quickly go through the format. Our first panel, which I will moderate, is titled Women-Led Startups, Changing the Landscape, and it will be for 35 minutes. Our second panel, also for 35 minutes, will focus on women investors creating impact and will be moderated by Hannah Fraser. During each panel, we hope to have time for Q&A. And lastly, Leah will be sharing some closing remarks. Harvard Global We is pleased to welcome the following panelists to the roundtable. For the first panel, we have 3 fabulous entrepreneurs from different sectors. Serena Fan, an early childhood educator and founder of Hong Kong Children's Discovery Museum. Rebecca Bastian, an entrepreneur, award-winning writer, artist, tech executive, mentor, wife, mother, and an aerial acrobat. And finally, Tanya Menendez, the founder and CEO of Snowball Wealth, a platform that provides free resources on debt, savings, and investments. For the second panel, we have Sarah Crownstar, an accomplished startup business advisor and an angel investor, Ebru Dorman, a Harvard alumni and an angel investor in wellness, biotech, industry 4.0, fintech, and digital life startups, and Linda Grip, an institutional investor, a corporate mergers and acquisitions executive, a hedge fund analyst, and a private venture investor with over 30 years of experience in this space. The last couple of years has shown the tenacity of female tech entrepreneurs starting to take leadership roles, founding startups, and developing products and services that are changing the world. We have intentionally selected these 6 women to bring to light different perspectives of being an entrepreneur and an investor. Through their unique perspectives, each will share how women are creating impact through entrepreneurship. So let's get started on our very first panel, Women-Led Startups, Changing the Landscape. I would like to start, if I can invite the three panelists, Rebecca, Serena, and Tanya, to take 2 minutes to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your company and your journey. So let's start with Rebecca.
Hey, so happy to be here. Hello from Seattle, Washington, where it is 7 in the morning right now. I'm the CEO and co-founder of OwnTrail, which is a platform for women to visualize and navigate our life paths. It started with a book that I wrote. So I've been at Zillow for 15 years. I was vice president of product and vice president of community and culture there. And I wrote a book called Blaze Your Own Trail, which is exploring and embracing all of the different paths that women take through our personal and professional lives, really with the goal of realizing and celebrating that there is no one right path through life. And the book led to building out owntrail.com, which is a place where we share our nonlinear journeys across our personal and professional lives in a very authentic way. So some much more real and less compartmentalized than what you might see on like LinkedIn or social media. It's a place where we're really taking up space and showing up as our full selves and our real journeys. And it's a really vibrant community of women supporting each other and helping each other make progress along those paths. I'm incredibly passionate about building by and for women in this space. And in addition to OwnTrail, I also advise and invest in other women-led startups and have formed and are very active in a lot of different entrepreneurial communities as well. And I'm thrilled to be here talking with this amazing group today.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Wonderful introduction. Can I invite Serena to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your company, your journey?
Hi, thank you for the invite. I'm Serena Fan. I'm based in Hong Kong. It's 11:14 p.m. So I'm the founder of the Hong Kong Children's Discovery Museum, also known as CDM. And my background is in early childhood education, and I really believe that young children should have the time and space and opportunity to develop their innate curiosities. So I've worked in the States, I've worked in mainland China, as well as in Hong Kong, in classroom settings, as well as in education management. And so the museum opened September of 2018, after 2 years of fundraising, planning, and renovating. And so we are the city's first children's museum, which aims to promote child-led learning through play experiences for children 10 years old and under. And we're a nonprofit organization and a member of the Association of Children's Museum. So given, I'm not sure how diverse this audience is, I'll quickly explain, just in case people don't know what a children's museum is. It's all about hands-on educational experiences. So the most similar is a science museum, but a science museum is focused purely on science concepts, and usually it's targeted for slightly older children, whereas a children's museum is more well-rounded and it's the target audience is for 10 and under. And so I'm really thankful for the invite.
Great. Thank you, Serena. And really appreciate you agreeing to be on the panel despite it being so late out there. And,
My pleasure.
love the work you do in this early education space for children. I would now like to invite Tanya to share a little bit about yourself, your company.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Tanya. I'm co-founder and CEO of Snowball Wealth. I started my career at Goldman Sachs and then started another venture-backed tech company prior to Snowball. And Snowball right now is a platform that builds tools to help women tackle debt and start to build wealth. And I started Snowball because it was a problem I experienced personally. Student debt was a huge financial burden, and I overpaid over $30,000 on my loans, and realized that it was easier to overpay than it was to save money on them. So our first product was a free student loan plan. And with payments paused during the pandemic, we've expanded our platform to help users save and invest their money while their payments are paused. So I'm super excited to be here and also share more about the journey.
Super. Thank you, Tanya. And really excited to hear more about Snowball Venture Wealth. So let's begin. Rebecca, I would like to start with you. Talk us about what was your inspiration for Own Trail and why do you think women require a platform like this? Maybe take us through your trail as a woman entrepreneur, the lows and the highs of your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I mentioned, I had been in corporate my whole career, although, I was one of the first employees at Zillow. So it actually was an early stage stealth startup when I joined, and then grew to be a big company over the course of 15 years. And I was at Microsoft before that. So I've grown up mostly through product leadership, and then kind of moved into social impact and diversity and culture initiatives as well. And what I've found is, over the years, as I moved more into leadership and mentorship roles, and I tend to be the person that says yes to every coffee chat, I have found this really reoccurring theme of women feeling like we need to know where we're going and how we're going to get there, and feeling like, we're scared to get it wrong. And that's not surprising, because we live in a world that tells us that there are like these clean linear paths that we're supposed to be taking. And we look around and we see all the kind of picture perfect end results and the highlight reels of people's accomplishments. And we don't see what the real journeys look like to get there. And so it can be really misleading, and it can make us feel like we're getting it wrong. And in reality, none of the paths are perfectly linear or clean, and they're all full of failures and things that didn't turn out as planned, and personal and professional lives being intertwined, and all of the beautiful messiness of life. But we just don't always get that in our purview, and we don't always see people that look like us in the places we aspire to either. And so with Own Trail, was really born out of that desire to see what the real journeys look like, and to see that from people that share our same identities and experiences. And what comes from that, when we're showing up authentically and really, taking up space on our own terms, is that we form these incredible bonds with, people that we might not have ever met before. And the diversity in the community is really powerful, and the way that women are connecting to really support each other along our journeys has been just really, really moving to see. And I've been really glad that, we set out. We launched about 2 years ago, and we set out with this goal of creating a space that really was undoing a lot of the toxic dynamics that exist on traditional social media or professional platforms, and building it in a new way that really fostered trust and vulnerability. And seeing that really unfold in the way that we've built this with our community has been extremely fulfilling. So, and we're just getting started. Our vision for this is huge.
Super. I think you're absolutely right, Rebecca, about how women, we all have this innate need to have a chalked out linear path, and we often avoid taking on risks in case we don't see that clear path. So wonderful to hear about the fabulous work you're doing at Own Trail, normalizing messiness in our career paths. So excited to hear more about this. Tanya, I would like to ask you a question. The total student debt in the US today is about $1.58 trillion, and about 30% of students still take loans to pay off education loans. Snowball Wealth provides tools and resources to help students pay their debt smartly. What inspired you to create this platform, and what is your goal with it in the coming years? I know you said that you yourself face this, but how did you go about creating this platform? Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, and like I mentioned, I had student debt myself, but also I realized that it wasn't just me. There's 30 million women in the US with student loans, and women are the fastest growing group of college grads, and currently hold over 2/3 of student debt outstanding. So we saw that there was a huge opportunity to create a platform that focuses in on this specific demographic with women with student debt, and solving their problems, or solving, for their pain points. And what we noticed was that immediately people gravitated towards the community. So they wanted to feel seen in the financial services industry, and they wanted to have a community that they could talk to about these financial decisions. And then they also wanted a plan on what are their options? There's dozens of ways to pay down your loans, but it's difficult to know which is the right way to do it. So our platform provides a free student loan plan. And then because payments were paused, like I mentioned, we had the opportunity to help people actually save and invest while their payments were paused. And we did that all through the community. And now we've actually launched some new products that that help people understand the next steps and understand how much they should be saving and investing. So it's been amazing to see the progress too in our community members, people, you know, refinancing their private loans, saving thousands and thousands of dollars, getting out of this feeling of stagnation where they felt like they were in this no man's lands of not knowing, you know, what exactly to do with their finances next. And through Snowball, they've been able to break out of that. So, you know, our vision is to be the platform that empowers women to become millionaires, to become financially free, and to not be held back by the debt that they started off their careers with.
Super. I cannot agree with you more. You know, financial literacy and being financially smart can make or break one. So amazing to hear your vision with Snowball Wealth. Next, Serena, I would like to ask you, you know, in this day and age of increasing pressure on children to demonstrate academic achievements, you decided to disrupt the early education system by stressing on the importance of playtime. Was it a difficult journey to make people understand the need for this?
Yes and no. Yes, in that the background of parents really does make a difference. So children's museums is quite a new concept in Asia. And so depending on who I speak to, the response is very different. So for those who have been privileged enough to visit the United States and have children and they go to children's museums, when they hear that I'm starting, or that there is a children's museum, there is pure excitement and joy because this is something that's missing in our city, and they see the value in the children's museum, and they're very excited and ask like, oh, how can we help support this? And when did you start? And they're super, super excited. And then they'll share the news that there's a children's museum in the city. Unfortunately, a large population has not interacted with a children's museum. And so it is difficult to explain to them, what is a children's museum? What do you do there? Why are you doing this? And even when we started the organization, even getting the bank account was a very difficult process because the bank had to understand what we were. And they kept being like, so is it a school? No, it's not a school. Is it a learning center? No, it's not a learning center. So what are you going to do there? So it took a lot of explanation. And thankfully, there's a lot of great examples in the United States. So I'm like, go check out this site, like this website. And even the contractor who worked with us for the renovation, until we had our grand opening, he did not really understand what we were trying to do until he brought his own children. And he's like, oh, so it's not a school. I was like, no, it's not a school. We've been working together for a year and a half. And you've installed these exhibit pieces for us. And he's like, oh, I get it now. And it really, having a physical space really helped a lot of people understand what we were trying to do. And especially when they had their children go and play, and they were playing, they were making these amazing discoveries themselves and realizing that, oh yes, there's more to academics. It was a very impactful moment when people actually got to step into the museum and feel and have real life experiences themselves, both children and adults, and seeing the value. So depending on the population, there were a lot of kindergarten principals and kindergarten educators who had heard about it, but they've never been to one. So when they came, they're like, oh my goodness, like, this is amazing. This is actually what we're trying to do at school, but we've only read about it, but now we can actually physically, tangibly see what open-ended play is and what learning through play is. And it's not just like children running around with no guidance. It's because they're so curious and interested in what's in their environment that that they're just naturally drawn to it, and then the adults can have conversations. So they were really able to see a lot of things unfold in front of their eyes. But yes, overall, it does take a lot of work to explain to adults like what it is that we're doing. But it's a fun challenge, and when people really get it, it's the best feeling and experience, because it's like an awakening. And I do hope that it is something that will stay with them, so that when their children are struggling academically at school, that they're realizing like, oh, wait a minute, you know, there are other avenues and other ways that my child can learn and maybe should be learning in that way. Yeah.
Wow, Serena, that sounds wonderful. I actually cannot wait to visit Hong Kong and visit museums.
Soon, hopefully.
So my next question is for all three of you. There's been a Harvard study which tried to identify why female entrepreneurs tend to receive less money, and they showed that VCs pose different types of questions to male and female entrepreneurs, and they found that this bias exists with both male and female VCs. I wanted to just understand, each one of you have raised funds for your ventures. Just try and understand, how has your fundraising journey been? And maybe start with Tanya. Could you share what your fundraising journey was like?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. So I raised funding for my last venture. We raised about 2.5 million. And I raised about 1.5 million for this recent venture. And it was a completely different experience, because for my first venture, I had a male co-founder, and we fundraised together for the most part. And so it was really interesting to see what the meetings were like when I was by myself. And at first I thought it was in my head, but then when it happens about 50 times, I don't think it is. And so, but in any case, from the first venture, we started out, we were also both underrepresented founders. So, there was a lot kind of going against us, but we started off with an accelerator program first. They made some introductions, and then, we actually focused on getting traction. And then once we got traction, we were then able to get funding about 6 months later. And then for this business, because I had already had contacts, I had, spent 5 years building that business. It became profitable, and because I had already some business contacts, I started off with my existing network. So some of my first angel investments were my mentors and friends of mine, because I think in the past, when I first started my career, there's no way I could have done like friends and family, but because I had spent some time building another tech company, it was a little bit easier the second time around. But there was still a lot to consider. So first, I went from a manufacturing tech company and marketplace, to a fintech company. And fintech itself is, a competitive market. And so there was that, pushback that I got from investors that, questioning whether I could start a fintech business, asking specific questions on how I would execute, how I would figure things out. And so I had to really understand the new culture of fintech and get the language and understand fully what the plan was before continuing to raise. So I did take some time to kind of understand all of the dynamics there and really begin planning prior to having some of these fundraising meetings. But yeah, and then the other piece that I'll add to the fundraising journey was I did focus on underrepresented and women led funds. And just because my product, I wanted my investors to reflect who my product was serving. And I think that it's been really interesting to see that even in the last 5 years, there's been more kind of funds led by women and underrepresented groups. So I think that's been a welcome change. But I know that there's still a long way to go. Like, especially Latinas, they get less than 1% of venture capital goes towards Latinas. And so I'm excited to hopefully change that number and inspire other kind of women and underrepresented groups to fundraise for their startups.
Sure, Tanya. And then seeing you successful, I'm sure a lot of other women will be inspired to do the same. So thank you for sharing that interesting perspective. Rebecca, you're an entrepreneur as well as an investor. Would love to hear your opinion and experience on women raising funds for their startups.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers don't lie, right? There's no way that women can be receiving, 2.3% of venture dollars without there being some pretty huge biases at play, especially when there's also data that says that women companies tend to outperform men's in terms of long-term value. So I knew the numbers before I went into this, and I didn't really internalize how much there really was bias in the space until experiencing it myself. And, so we've raised 1.2 million pre-seed so far, and I'm actually out there raising our seed round now, which I've learned a lot. It's feeling a little bit smoother, but it's like raising funding is a numbers game anyways. And then when you have additional biases stacked against you, and in our case, we're a company that's fully led by women, building for women, and incredibly values driven. So we're not willing to compromise on any growth at all costs kind of tactics. And because of that, the numbers game, the funnel of that of the numbers, just dramatically increases how many people you have to talk to in order to find the right ones. The good news is that I didn't budge on our values. And one of those values, like Tanya, was that, I insisted on having a diverse cap table because, similarly, I wanted our investors to reflect our community. And so we've ended up with, right now, our cap table is 70% women, 50% people of color, and all very, very supportive and values aligned. So that was great. It was just a really long, difficult process to get there, to find those right people. But I think that's important. And, I've started, like you said, I do some angel investing and LP investing myself. And I found that really helpful. And I advise a couple of funds as well now. And I think that there's so many power dynamics at play that I've found it really helpful to get the perspective of the investor too. And also try to do things a little differently. I'm very focused on founders that are underestimated, that are building with really values-driven companies, and emerging fund managers that are investing in them. And so we definitely, we all just need to leverage any power that we have to build new systems, because a lot of the existing ones just aren't really working and aren't equitable.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. I think you bring a very interesting perspective. I think more women investors, especially those like you who understand the biases, will really help change the existing disparity in the funding. So fingers crossed for that. Serena, nonprofits usually rely on donations and grants to fund their work. While startup investors support an organization in the hopes of financial return, donors invest in nonprofits in the hopes of a different kind of return, impact. Could you share some light on fundraising for not-for-profit ventures, especially libraries and museums?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question because from someone who just came from an education background, and I had no plans to actually run a nonprofit. It just kind of happened based on the nature of the work. And as I'm learning about this space, I realized that it really mirrors a lot with just a startup. Startups all are looking for different ways to fundraise, but the fundamentals of fundraising are actually all the same for profit and nonprofit. But the hurdle for a nonprofit is that there's no equity. And so the storytelling becomes very different. But at the same time, we have all these goals and visions that we still need a lot of hard numbers. And so within the philanthropy space, it's always saying how do we quantify? I can tell you that 82,000 people walk through our doors, but how am I going to measure that impact and that value? And so it's and digging through that data. And And collecting data requires money because you need someone standing there and interviewing them, or you need a system, a computer software system. So it becomes a very chicken and the egg issue of like, I need that tool or I need that person, but I don't have the funds to do that. But the donors saying that, or our advisors are saying like, this is really important. You need hard data, you need quantifiable data. And I was like, can I just share a really touching story about the student that came from the School of the Blind and like their experience? And I have a video and they're like, that's all great, but we need data. And so it was a very big wake up call of like, yes, I'm a nonprofit, but I need to start thinking like a for-profit and for fundraising and learning like and telling like my colleagues, like, guys, we need data. Let's figure out how we can quantify all these things and problem solve those so that we're utilizing our existing resources to do quantifiable work, but at the same time, like what Rebecca said, holding on to our values of what we are trying to do and showcasing it, not just through numbers, but mixing in the numbers and the storytelling. So it's been a really interesting experience. I'm reading more about, for-profit fundraising, and sometimes there's these YouTube videos. I'm like, oh, that's useful. And that's useful. And so I think, and also in particular in Hong Kong, they're quite stringent about a lot of the rules. So doing best practice, I think overall has been really eye-opening and like good reminders, like any type of business that you're operating should always do best practice, no matter if you're for-profit or a nonprofit, and really leveraging like what Tanya said, the network of the people you do know, and they know the work that you've put in, and then so using their credibility to then just go meet more people and continuing the storytelling and why there is such a need. Yeah.
Thank you, Serena, for sharing these insights and the importance of, couldn't agree with you more on the importance of data, even for impact ventures, and I hope we see more of, the catalytic and patient capital in the impact space in the near future. Before I kind of ask you one round of last question, I would love to kind of ask the audience if there are any questions please put them out in the chat box and we will take it after this final question. So any final insights or advice for the students joining us today who will possibly be future founders, So we can start with whoever wants to go first.
My advice is always to just get started as soon as possible. Like, there's never going to be the right moment. There's never going to be the person that's going to say, you should do it right now. Like, no one's going to tell you the right time to do it. So don't wait for validation. From others, just start by actually building and prototyping and talking to users. So I really encourage people to get out of like, you should do research and analyze and all of that, but come up with a date that you want to soft launch, come up with a date that you want to hard launch, like give yourself these timelines and deadlines to actually execute on them. And I think the other piece that I meant to say also in the fundraising part is that I do think that fundraising is a skill that can be learned. I mean, I'm still learning the different iterations of it as I progress in my journey, but I do, read books like one of the other panelists mentioned, watch YouTube videos, talk to other founders, get advice, and really take it upon yourself to learn about leadership, learn about management, learn about fundraising, and just read all of the books, watch all of the YouTubes, and know that a lot of these skills can be learned.
Sure. I see a couple of questions in the audience. We'll go with the insights first. Sorry about that. Rebecca, you next. Final piece of advice or insights to our students logging in today.
Yeah, I mean, so two things that I'm so glad for are that I'm building something that I'm so passionate about, and that's really what I recommend. I literally, when I decided to leave my executive career to do this, it was because I couldn't not do it. Like this just felt like the thing I was meant to be doing, the problems I was meant to be solving. And entrepreneurship is a roller coaster. So you really need that strong why to keep you going on the, the dips, you know, and I also recommend a strong community too. Like that makes a big difference. And, you know, kind of like Serena was talking about, and I really resonate with this too, is like, it's not always easy to be doing something completely new and innovative. Like people don't always get it. There's not the pattern matching to fit into, but I also find that to be incredibly fulfilling and exciting because you're not just trying to make the X for Y or whatever. You're building something new that hasn't been done. And that's, you know, if you're going to do this whole entrepreneurship thing, you might as well really do it and be innovative, right? So passions and innovation, I think are the two ingredients that I would definitely recommend for pursuing a startup.
I totally agree with Rebecca. I was going to say the same thing. You really have to love your baby. It's literally like producing a child, and you just have to love it on the low days and on the high days. And for the museum, we had social unrest before the COVID. And so when COVID hit, I had a friend ask me, he's like, okay, now that you know what you know, like, would you have started the museum? And I was quite struck by his question, and I paused and I was like, yes, I would definitely still do it. I've gained so much knowledge and experience and met wonderful people through doing this, and I'm deeply passionate, and I strongly feel the city needs a children's museum, especially now with COVID. Anyways, but I said, yeah. But the one thing I would do differently is what Rebecca was saying, that's community. You know, I have a strong community, but in terms of professional community and the people who I work with, I think I could have done a better job of like having strong key people working with me, so that it's not just me making all the decisions when there's a lot of pieces happening. So, but in that sense, like because I have a lot of different hats, I get to problem solve every day. I get to experience new things and see things from different perspectives that I think a normal job you wouldn't have that. So my advice is like, be super passionate about your idea. You can't wait to execute it. And also that you love problem solving, because that's basically what you're constantly doing besides fundraising. Fundraising is problem solving. So yeah, those big two.
Yeah. I think that's the job description of an entrepreneur, right? Problem solving.
Yeah, exactly.
Super insights and advices, panelists. So, I mean, I would love to keep going, but we just have 1 minute before we wrap up this session. So I'm going to ask a question, a very interesting question in the audience from Jessica Somol. You know, it says, while the challenges facing women entrepreneurs are well documented, how would you articulate the inherent advantages women have in the entrepreneurial space? And I thought it was very interesting. We all keep speaking about the challenges, but I'm sure I think we have a lot of advantage as well. So please, anyone or all three of you.
I love that question. I'll jump in there because I definitely don't feel like, yes, there's bias at play, but I definitely don't feel victimized because I feel so empowered to be building as a woman in this space. And I think that I mentioned like statistically women tend to outperform men financially. And I think like a lot of that is the grit and power that comes from not having everything handed to you easily. You know, I think that I see a lot of white male counterparts that have a huge amount of money just kind of shoved at them when they have an idea. And there's, you don't necessarily learn the same level of problem solving and prioritization and innovation to do a lot with less when you're in that scenario. So, we've done a lot with not that much, and I think we're better for that. But also like the community that I mentioned, like there's so many women founders I've become so close to, and women investors, and the whole ecosystem. Like I feel so close to this community, and I very much feel like we're not competing against each other, we're collaborating and we're supporting each other. And I think that kind of abundance mindset is inherently kind of a feminine trait. And I see I think there's a lot of closeness amongst women entrepreneurs specifically, and I'm really grateful for that.
Great, wonderful, Rebecca. Thank you all so much. Any last thoughts from anybody else? Super.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think also from the business perspective, a lot of ideas are overlooked. And so I'm really excited about this next wave of like female entrepreneurs that are solving problems that, other founders are overlooking and the industry overall is overlooking.
I think women are great multitaskers as well. I think that's a huge advantage we have. We can spin a number of balls up in the air and clearly, precisely identify which one's going to fall and catch it. So I think we are great multitaskers as well. Thank you all so much. This has been such an insightful discussion. And while we would have loved to take every question out there in the chat box, we're clearly out of time. I would request the panelists, if you like, and if you can stay back, please answer to these questions in the chat box if you think you can. I would also like to thank each one of you for sharing your stories and journeys so candidly with our audience. I'm sure your experiences will be extremely helpful to a number of budding entrepreneurs joining us today. Thank you. Before we transition to the panel, let's look at opportunities. As Sajida likes to point out, there have been some silver linings in the last couple of years. Have you found any upside, such an opportunity for growth and empowerment during this time of global shifting? Please feel free to kind of answer this in your chat box. Super. While you go ahead and answer that question, I'm going to introduce our second panel discussion focused on women investors creating impact. In the last few years, there has been an increasing need for women to be on the other side of the table and be the investors investing in startups. We have an excellent panel of women investors sharing their journey and insights. The panel will be moderated by Hannah Fraser. Hannah is a first-year student at Harvard and an entrepreneur and founder of the company Question Connect. So without further delay, over to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today. So first, I think we're just going to start off by asking each of you to take 2 minutes to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your company and your journey. Linda, we could start with you.
Hi, I'm Linda Grube. I'm the co-founder of Avestria Ventures. We're based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we invest in early stage women's health companies and female-founded life science ventures.
Awesome, thank you. Ibru, what about you? I think you're still muted. Sorry.
I'm on mute. All right, thanks. Firstly, I'm class of 99 from Harvard Business School. That gives away my age, turning 50 this year. I have a son who's 15. Today, I'm on day 4 of testing COVID positive, so I hope my voice will not fail me. I'm from Turkey, had 25 years of global experience in 3 continents, working with McKinsey in Istanbul, Warsaw, London, Morgan Stanley and Orange in London, Maxis in Kuala Lumpur, and then back home in Istanbul since 2013. In early 2020, I left full-time professional life and joined what's called the portfolio career. So now I sit on the board of HSBC Turkey and 2 other companies, one in media, one in logistics. I've been in this startup world since 1999. Actually, I left McKinsey in 2000 to do my own startup. Not the best timing, that was just before the NASDAQ crash. But that led me to join Morgan Stanley as their first employee in their new strategic ventures fund. Then I followed my boss from there to join Orange Ventures. And more recently, between 2015 and 2020, I've been chairwoman of Starters Up, which is an early stage investor and accelerator. I'm an angel investor in over 10 companies, and professionally I've invested in over 75 companies. And lastly, I'm involved in several NGOs relating to entrepreneurship, women's empowerment, and environment and climate change. I've been on the board of Endeavor in Turkey since, until last year, which allowed me to attend a number of international selection panels and meeting entrepreneurs from all over the world, which has been fantastic. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, and I hope you're doing okay. I'm so sorry to hear about your.
It's not too bad.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and Sarah.
Good morning. I started off in the legal world practicing law for about 7 years, and then went into the not-for-profit world for about 20, and then started backing entrepreneurs. And over the course of the past 5 to 7 years, I've been on small company boards. I've worked with our accelerator in Chicago, 1871, on that board. And I am investing in companies that I believe will transform the landscape as we know it, both for women's health and for education.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ebru, can you tell us a little bit about the difference in investing inside and outside the United States, or just the different projects you're working on, both internationally and in the US? I know that you're on the Harvard Business Board for Turkey. Just maybe a little bit about the differences in the culture of investing that you've noticed.
It's difficult to generalize really US versus the rest of the world, but I'll share some perspectives, especially for US versus Europe, where I have more experience. Firstly, from a fundraising perspective, it is a lot easier and faster to raise funding in the US than in Europe or anywhere in the rest of the world. And especially when it comes to later stage funding and growth capital, with perhaps the exception of London and Berlin, it's really a lot more difficult to raise funding for startups in Europe. In the US, a promising startup will happily burn cash, and their investors will be happy they burn cash for a long time. But the startups in Europe don't get that luxury for very long. So they will be very focused on generating a revenue model and getting to break even. Which will really also impact their growth profile. I think the culture of the risk appetite and the attitude towards failure is very different in the US versus the rest of the world. In the US, it's okay to be a failed entrepreneur. That doesn't make you an uninvestable entity, right? And you're not frowned upon by your friends and family or the society at large. Whereas in Europe, especially in Turkey, where I'm from, it's a real taboo to be a failure, right? It is not taken as part of the journey. People are aspiring to be serial entrepreneurs, but nobody will go around and say, I've already failed, I've learned. That will not be a welcome experience. And along the same lines, the failing fast phenomenon happens more in the US than in other parts of the world. So you'll have what some people may call dead wood, living, but not really being a startup anymore. But the entrepreneur is refusing to call it off because they don't want to be seen as a failure. So I guess the failing fast also happens more in the US because the market is so much more competitive. For any one given field, you'll have many more companies competing, startups competing. So you very soon find out if you have a chance or not, in that market, whether you can create a differentiation. And lastly, I want to share something from the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor 2020 report. Very interesting finding. They found that in North America, Europe, and South America, the number one reason for becoming an entrepreneur is to make a difference. Just like the 3 entrepreneurs we've just heard. Whereas in the rest of the world, improving their economic well-being comes number one reason, number one motivator for starting a company. In fact, if you push it further in developing markets, you have what is called the necessity entrepreneurs. So people who have to start a business because they can't get a job, right? So on the one hand, you have opportunity to make a difference, create value. On the other hand, entrepreneurship is your only option. So it's a big world, you know, lots of differences, but that's just a quick snapshot.
Thank you so much for that insight. That's so interesting. Sarah, you invest in reusable products and have helped launch sustainability-focused companies, such as Thinks and Speaks products. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it was like starting with young companies in the process of launching startups?
Thank you for the question, Hannah. And first of all, I'm thrilled to be on this panel with Ebru and Linda. Both are extremely talented women in the field. And I love working with young companies and meeting people. So, you know, if anyone here wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'd be delighted to respond. What I bring to the table typically is connecting ideas, capital, and talent. It's especially wonderful for me when a team gels and sees traction. And so for this group, I thought it would be helpful to share some of my experiences through some stories of a successful launch and one that failed, and what I gleaned from those experiences. So Thinks and Speaks are huge success stories. There was this tremendous need for the product. For those of you who don't know it, one is a period underwear and one is underwear for stress urinary incontinence. And having a true need is basic to a company working. The founders were genius marketers. What got them off the map is they found the right authority to get approval to put ads up in the Times Square subway station. They shared with them their very limited budget and said they would take whatever they could just to get their ads up in that space. They got approval, and let's take a look at what these ads were. I am lost here. So the grapefruit is intended to, it's off again. Okay. The grapefruit, was intended to be obviously a woman's vagina, and the egg was intended to show really just how a woman's body works. So forgive me here.
We'll put them back up, Sarah, while you keep talking. I think we're just having.
No, I understand. I understand. So anyway, many people were mortified by this. Mothers covered their children's eyes, but it made huge press and really got us on the map with a very limited budget, which was brilliant. And then when we went omni-channel, we ended up in Selfridges, and there was a huge Twitter movement there that got us on the map. They were mortified by these controversial ads. They put us in the basement and then in a storage locker. Someone got wind of this, and there was a Twitter movement where 140 women walked in that day and asked to go to the storage locker or closet to buy the product. Then they moved us up to the third floor lingerie department right by the escalator. So again, this was a very low cost way of getting customer acquisition. So what were the traits of these founders that were so great? They were creative, they were fearless, and they were lucky. So, when you're trying to disrupt an industry, you need to do something different, and you need to be scrappy because you won't have a lot of money. And sometimes you aren't lucky, sometimes you don't get those breaks. So just to quickly flip to another company, 1 in 9 women are reported to have incontinence. And we know that's sadly underreported. And we know that the products are horrible. They're bulky, they're intended for someone who's bedridden. And after a 2-year search, I found what truly was I believe the best technology on the market. It was 50% thinner, it wicked away faster, it won the industry award. So all of the experts in the industry, said this was the best technology, but we were unable to launch it because we had big box founders who overspent their budget. They put 2-minute videos online rather than 7-second videos. And they went against board advice basically on how to spend their budget. So what's the lesson there? Once you create a team of advisors, listen to them. So Hannah, you asked, what is it like working with young companies that are launching? Helping founders is all about thinking about their issues, starting with their budget, and getting some sort of revenue going and customer acquisition. And if you get that going, it's really fun.
Thank you so much for sharing. Those graphics too are very cool. I can't believe they're in Times Square. That's awesome. Linda, what would you say to a person who is new at investing? Do you have any words of advice or life experiences that might be helpful to people who are apprehensive about beginning?
Well, first of all, you really shouldn't invest any money that you're not in a position to lose. And sometimes back when I was much younger, people would ask me what I was investing in my personal account. And coming out of college, I didn't have a personal account, right? So, don't be intimidated about the fact you're starting small, or that you are maybe just watching investments. Maybe you don't have the capital to lose, and maybe there are other ways you could be involved. The next thing you need to figure out is what type of investor you are. There's a type of investor called a momentum investor, which is the type of investor who, when something is hot, they jump on it, right? So they are very good at figuring out what the crowd is interested in and going with it. That is not the type of investor I am. And if I were to try to invest that way, I wouldn't make any money. The type of investor I am is someone who wants to take my time and really understand what I'm doing. And so the way I can make money is to look for opportunities that are largely being ignored by others, and to try to really educate myself and make sure that I understand why I think it's an opportunity, and generally get there early. And if I'm very confident in my views, I don't need other people to tell me if they think I'm right or wrong. In fact, if they tell me I'm wrong, it doesn't really matter, because I've spent all that time really convincing myself. And that doesn't mean I don't take in new information as I go, right? I always try to hear, is there something I'm missing? But again, that's a matter of deciding what kind of investor you are. So I wouldn't want to invest in something I didn't understand, right? I'll tell you, I never would have invested in I didn't, and I never would have invested in Facebook, and I'm not a Facebook user, right? That's okay, right? Figure out what you know and you're interested in, and you have networks to help you understand. So that's my advice.
Thank you so much. Back to Ibru, you authored a book that was titled Living Beyond Dreams. Could you share a little bit about what the book is about and what inspired you to write it?
Second. Thanks for asking about the book. It's my passion project since a little over a year. Well, I've been mentoring young people, doing talks at universities and high schools for years, and really enjoyed doing that. During the pandemic, I asked myself, is this scalable? Just a question that we ask startups as investors, is this a scalable model of creating value? And the answer was no. So I decided to write a book to be able to reach more people, and also to have something that's longer lasting. And I wanted to inspire the readers, with my story starting, from a state school, going all the way to Harvard through scholarships. And I also studied at Berkeley, the NATO Science Scholarship. So it's a pretty inspiring story that you don't need to be, born into a wealthy family to have a, good education life and a good professional life. But also I'm a personal growth enthusiast. So I've accumulated so many tools, so to say, along the way that help me be successful, happy, healthy. So I wanted to share this as a toolbox with the readers and really empower them and, inspire them and make them feel stronger, against the challenges life throws at us. So I treated this more as a social project. I saw myself as a social entrepreneur as I got started with this. And within 12 weeks of writing the first line, the book was on the shelves. So within 1 month, I had the prototype of my product, right? The draft book, printed and bound in a copy shop. My father was the first reader. And then along the way, I emailed 20 different readers, different audience groups to give feedback on the different iterations. And I didn't try to get to perfection because I knew there was going to be multiple editions. So now I'm on 12 prints. So I thought I can correct this along the way. I just want to get it out fast. So that's what happened in 12 weeks, which is quite remarkable. I never imagined even writing a book a few months before the project started. So it's been fantastic. And as I thought of this as a social enterprise, I thought a book is just a form factor. So I have a message to give, I have some tips to share, some practical information to share. So I should have other form factors. So then started the TV and radio appearances and the Instagram and YouTube live videos. Unfortunately, they're all in Turkish, but I am working on the English version of my book. And I've also published 2 short pieces on LinkedIn. If anybody's interested, you can have a quick read on my featured posts. And lastly, the proceeds from my book are all donated to a charitable foundation. So it's really for me a passion project with double social impact.
Wow, that is quite an impressive turnaround. And I love that your father was the first person to read your book, because it would definitely be my parents as well.
Very special.
Yeah. I guess some people are asking if you could share the link and the title of your book in the comments.
Sure.
And also, did you self-publish your book?
I went through a publisher in Turkey, but I kept, this is for any future writers, I kept all rights except for the prints for myself. So for any international publishing, I can do self-publishing. And anything digital, I kept the rights.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Linda, can you describe Avestria Ventures' mission statement and share a little bit about why you decided to invest in early stage women's health and female-led life science ventures?
Sure. So again, the mission statement is really just to invest in early stage women's health companies and female founder life science ventures. And those are 2 separate buckets. So it can be either or can hit both. And the reason why is, again, I like to invest where other people aren't investing, because again, I just don't understand how you can get outsized returns. If you're going to invest in the same thing the market invests in, you're going to have market returns, and which generally doesn't make you quite that attractive. So one of the things that had bothered me for over 20 years was the fact that less than 2% of it, or about 2% of venture capital dollars was going to female founders. And I used to try to figure it out, right? I'd say, well, women aren't getting tech degrees, or I spent a lot of brain power trying to make sense of it. And, after 20 years, I stopped trying to make sense of it. And I was at one Harvard Business School alumni event, and there were so many young women who were recent graduates of the business school who were entrepreneurs. And so it was just so clear there was no shortage of really capable, bright women with exciting ideas. And to be honest, the market was just missing it. So it was a big opportunity. Then the other thing is my whole background has been essentially investing in healthcare, those 2 combined. And our society, our scientific community, and our clinical community have really evolved in their thinking about what women's health is. My partner, Tracy Dooley, who's about 40, when she went to Stanford Medical School, she was taught that the average patient was a 150-pound man. And it's interesting to me to think that somehow you get to a man as our average, right? And so that's, when you think about it, that's really the way most of our clinicians have been trained. The other thing in terms of science, I had, again, been investing in healthcare for a really long time, and I had never once thought, when I was looking at a company and they'd say, well, here's the data from the clinical trial, 75% of the patients X, 25% of the patients Y. I myself never stopped to think beyond the word patient. Like, were these patients young? Were they old? Were they women? Were they men? What was their ethnicity? What was their social background? And I think most of us at this point know that the vast majority of participants in clinical trials are highly educated white men who live on either one of the coasts with well above average income. And when you think about it, it's pretty hard to participate in a clinical trial if you have a job where you get 2 10-minute breaks and a lunch hour, right? And you're going to have to take the bus to go somewhere to participate in the clinical trial, right? So there are all kinds of structural issues that have been, really sort of behind the scenes impacting what we think of as health. And so I also had never realized that until 1993, women were actually banned from participating in clinical trials. So all medicines and devices were all being tested on men. And so then 8 out of 10 drugs that were pulled from the market because of safety reasons were pulled because they had safety issues in women, because they had never been tested on women. So, we're in this society that thinks that women are just lightweight men, right? We're just small men. And yet, I think in part because of genomics and increases in improvements in technology, we're now realizing that the biology of women and men is very, very different. And that it's not just about giving birth or not giving birth, right? COVID's a great example of how we're realizing men and women have very different immune systems and very different immune responses. And it's why you're seeing that men are much more likely to die from COVID than women are, but women are 4 times as likely to develop long COVID, which is really an autoimmune disease. And 80% of all patients with autoimmune diseases are women. So I myself as an investor, when someone used to say women's health, I used to think, oh, contraception, right? And so when investors would say women's health is a niche market, I understood why they were saying that. But if you think if we change our definition of what women's health is to be everything that, the health of women, it's impacting them exclusively, and that could be menopause, that could be ovarian cancer, it could be childbirth, but also everything that impacts women disproportionately. So Alzheimer's disease disproportionately impacts women. And again, autoimmune disease disproportionately impacts women. But also there's this whole category of disease and health where it impacts men and women differently. And a great example is cardiovascular disease. And again, it's embarrassing to admit that it was only about 5 years ago that I realized that if a woman was having a heart attack, she was likely to be feeling nauseous, to be sweating, to just feel fatigue, all symptoms which many women think of as being associated with having the flu. And unfortunately, our healthcare providers tend to view that as having the flu. So if a woman arrives in the emergency room and she's having a heart attack, she will be coded as having abnormal symptoms because her symptoms are not the same as a man's, right? A man has normal symptoms, a woman has abnormal symptoms. And yet the cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer of women. And in some years, more women die of cardiovascular disease than men do. And yet even our healthcare providers don't necessarily understand how to recognize a woman's heart attack. Then there are other things that are more complicated, like colorectal cancer or thyroid cancer, which impact men and women differently and need to be treated differently. So when you think about, going from maybe 10 years ago and this idea that women were small men to understanding now that our biology and how disease impacts us is incredibly different, you start realizing that we need to think about them differently. And yet only 4% of R&D dollars are focused on women's health, right? And only 11% of NIH funding is focused on programs specifically for women's health. And one of the things that's really, I don't know if it's funny or really sad, but if you look at spending for cardiovascular disease within the NIH, only 4% of NIH cardiovascular disease is focused on women-specific cardiovascular disease. And if you look at autoimmune disease, it's only about 11%. And again, who gets autoimmune disease? Women. And yet the NIH is only going to allocate 11%. So the reason we got into what we were doing is it just seemed like the investment community was missing the boat. And 5 years ago, 95% of all venture capitalists were men. And now it's only 87%. And when you think about it, we invest in things where we have passion, where we have networks, where we have life experience, right? And so I don't think there's anything wrong with the fact that men generally haven't been that interested in investing in women's health, right? There's a funny thing on Jimmy Kimmel that came out recently about whether, they asked the man on the street, how many uteruses does a woman have? And how many fallopian tubes does a woman have? And the answers were really frightening. But, it's, you can see if we have a really homogeneous investment community, they're going to make pretty homogeneous decisions on what gets invested in. And they're going to see opportunities that tend to be homogeneous. And so that just creates this amazing opportunity for investors and entrepreneurs who are outside of that mainstream, because innovation doesn't come from just building the slightly better widget. It comes from inventing the widget that nobody's even realized that exists or that can be made, right? So that's my soapbox.
Thank you so much for sharing. Honestly, that you just brought some great context and perspective and a lot of things I had never realized before. So thank you for sharing. Sarah, on to you. What was the most difficult obstacle that you've had to face during your career, and what helped you throughout that time?
So I've been on 12 boards over 36 years, and some boards, excuse me here. Sorry. And some boards just want some board members who want you to just rubber stamp the vote, and some boards want independent thinkers. So for me, the most challenging obstacle has been when I'm expected to rubber stamp a vote. On one board I was on, a very big shareholder wanted to do something that would put them in an economically better position than other shareholders. And I had to decide, do I reach out to a lawyer to stop this? Is it illegal? It seems unethical. If I do, I lose my board seat. So do I just sit back and say nothing so I can stay on the board? I love the company. I wanted to help the company grow, but I couldn't just sit by idly. So, the way I saw it, I was put on this board to represent all shareholders, and I had to stand up for all of them. So I did call legal counsel, and I did get the deal terms changed, and I did end my tenure with the board. It made me very sad, but I know I did the right thing, and the CEO knows I did the right thing too.
Thank you. That must have been very difficult, but as long as we leave thinking that we've done what's right, I think that probably helps a lot. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you guys so much for sharing all of your insights. This has been incredibly inspirational, especially as a first-year college student myself, who hopefully will be an entrepreneur one day. I mean, I have a small company right now that I started in high school, but nothing that compares to you guys. So this has been incredibly inspirational. So thank you so much for sharing. And I think we are going to open up for Q&A. If anybody in the audience would like to share their questions via the chat, I can go ahead and share them out loud.
Hannah, there's a question for you that I sent you via direct message. If you could just check the second question that I sent you.
Oh, got it. Since less than 1% of startups. So someone asked, Robert Padulo asked, since less than 1% of startups raise venture capital, and that almost all money raised comes from angel investors, don't you think a big part of fundraising challenge for women entrepreneurs is the scarcity of women angel investors?
My gut reaction to that is, don't we think the problem is the scarcity of assets that are controlled by women because they haven't earned the same amount that men have been able to earn, right? I don't mean to be facetious, but one of my friends, I've forgotten which one, somebody was doing research into angel investing. And in fact, women do participate much less in angel investing than men do. I don't know how much of that is lack of resources. It may be of lack of willingness to assume risks that are in fact risks. I mean, I think there's been some data that shows that women tend to be more conservative financially than men are. There's also something that's gone on where men call, if men see a great investment idea, supposedly, this is what I've heard, I don't know what the data is, but that they'll call up their buddies and they'll say, great investment idea, let's all invest in this together. And that hasn't really evolved to the same degree among females. There are two different angel groups that I can just mention right off the bat. One is Golden Seeds, which are a group of women angel investors. They invest primarily in women entrepreneurs. Another one that's there is Astia Angels, and those are both men and women who are investing in female entrepreneurs. So there are, and there's so many angel groups out there that I'd encourage you, again, even if you don't really want to invest or have the money to invest, you may be able to join these angel groups sort of as and say, look, I'm willing to do some of the due diligence. If I'm not bringing money to the table, there can be other ways you can get involved to become more comfortable. But yes, it is an issue that early stage investing has been more dominated by men than women.
Thank you. And another question from Avella, who asked, how do you personally empower female entrepreneurs in developing countries?
I'll take this one. I haven't actually done this per se with just a company overseas, but it has to be just the same way you do it in the States, which is you provide capital and you provide connections. You provide, mentorship as to how they build a team. You help them come up with a business plan that makes sense. You help them think through how to get revenue. It's really all the same. It's not, I think, any different if it's overseas. It's just there may be more limited capital or more limited ability to get mentorship and advice.
Yeah, and if I can just add one more thing, I think having role models is a big thing. And in emerging markets, they will have fewer role models of the startup entrepreneurs who've been really successful, female entrepreneurs. So I think just helping them believe in themselves that, they could be one of the future role models of the future generations. And women being perfectionists, and especially, as I said earlier, in the emerging markets or rest of the world, this risk-averse culture being more prominent. I think also mentoring them around, getting them comfortable about risk of failure and helping them realize that, unless you get out of your comfort zone, you're not really going to achieve your true potential. So I think, as Sarah said, that mentorship is really valuable. Sometimes they just need a little bit of push to have the courage. One of the things I've been really happy about, and one of the comments I've been really happy about receiving about my book is from people who said after reading, they've decided to quit their job and get into their dream project, whatever it is. It could be a company, a social project, but people really do need that inspiration and encouragement, and a little goes a long way sometimes.
Actually, I'm going to jump back in because I'm thinking there are companies I'm invested in overseas. So there are a couple ways you can do this. One way to provide capital is if you know people in the not-for-profit world that can set up a structure where they can get grants so that they can get funding. Usually they can apply for a grant and they can get the funds, and they may also get contacts through that opportunity. Another is to encourage people to go over with you, to meet the people that are running the running the companies. So what I'm thinking of is there's a company called Panka in Sierra Leone, and I know people that are always taking their friends and colleagues over there to see what is being built, because they are providing job opportunities in a place where there are so few job opportunities. So, again, it's coming up with the different vehicles to provide the support and the finances needed.
Thank you. Well, I think we're running a little bit over, so I'm going to pass it back to Leah. But again, thank you guys so much for your participation in today's panel. It was a great way to start off my Saturday. And I really appreciate hearing all of your amazing insight.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Wow. Let me just say how thrilled I am with this, our fifth annual roundtable and our second virtual one. This pandemic's challenges have only honed our ability to pivot our programming to enable the empowerment and the expanded connectivity that we've had today. You've just seen an example. So first, thank you to our brilliant panelists for generously making time to share their experience and wisdom. So there are entrepreneurs, Rebecca, Serena, and Tanya, and our investors, Ibru, Linda, and Sarah. And of course, there's some overlap between the two groups. And to our facilitators for helping keep the discussion flowing. Great work, Hannah and Artie, as usual. And then, of course, our team. A very special thank you to Artie and Kendall for all your exemplary work in developing and bringing the program to all of us, and also to the rest of our board members who were very helpful in sourcing our fantastic panel members. Before we let you go, let me remind you, please join Harvard Global We if you haven't yet. That's harvardglobalwe.org is our website. You can join there. Because then you'll find out that upcoming are our Global We Connect programs headed by our Fireside Chat. That's on March 12th, and that will feature Women for Women International and its CEO, Laurie Adams. That will be followed by our fifth Women's Empowerment Expo, which is being held again in a virtual format on April 23rd and 30th, with the themes of education and healthy communities. Registration details for both of these exciting events will be available soon, and we hope you'll all join us. And finally, we are looking for Harvard Global We ambassadors from our membership, from among you, our audience, for the March 16th Harvard Global Networking Nights. And specifically, we're looking for people to represent us in Boston, in the Bay Area, in Washington, D.C. and Chicago, and they are going to be a combination of live and virtual events. So if you are available and interested in speaking with prospective members about Harvard Global We, why you like Harvard Global We, please contact our membership chair, that's Corinne Wee, and that's membership at harvardglobalwe.org. Please remember, we welcome volunteers to join our teams, and we appreciate donations that help keep us sustainable doing what we do. Please check our website for all these ways to participate in our mission. And I will stop here, and I will head it over to our president, Sajida, who would like to say a few words before we close.
Thanks, Leah. Again, on behalf of everybody at Global We, thank you so much to our panelists and moderators. I think this was honestly our best roundtable ever. And for me, you know, seeing other women and having you sort of inspire us, it just shows us how empowering it can be to see women in these kinds of roles and to learn from you and to benefit from the wisdom of your experiences, you know, the falling down and getting up, but also your successes for sure. I wanted to reiterate something that one of you said, that, you know, being disruptive is a good thing. And, you know, it's really critical for all of us to remember that and not hesitate to take the road less traveled. So remember, Global We is here for you. And as Leah said, we urge you to join us, and we look forward to seeing you at many more of our events. Many of them are still being held virtually, so it does allow global participation, you know, from more and more of you. But thank you again, all of you, for joining us today. Stay well, stay safe, and we hope to see you again very soon at our next event around the corner. Take care. Bye-bye.